I'm going to keep going, try to get better. Today we're going to talk about is Clapton as a freeform artist. And But I did a video. I'm doing kind of a little series, if you will. I'm not sure how I'll space them out, but I'm doing a couple different videos on Clapton's best guitar work. And the first one was about Clapton as a student of the blues, and how he's been a lifelong student of the blues and a blues purist. But that purity and that student quality of always learning new things and always respecting the tradition, which is a good student, is always respectful of the wisdom of the elders and the tradition that he's entering into, but yet is able to make it his own, and sort of it becomes a part of him and his artistry, which means it sort of translates into a new generation, a new time, a new context. And that's kind of, to me, the ideal. And I said that I thought the album that epitomized that, among a lot of tracks and other things he's done, but I think the album that epitomizes that is John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. It may not just be Clapton, it may also reflect the John Mayall influence, but Clapton's role on that's definitely that student of the blues, taking it and making it his own, but very grounded in the discipline of those, of those blues songs. And one of the things about that album, though, is I think all the songs, I'm not sure there's one that's there are maybe some 4-minute songs on there, but everything's pretty tight, There's some great solos, but they're very defined solos within the structure of the songs, which is that discipline, and every song has a distinct element. But today we're going to talk about is Clapton as a freeform artist. And freeform is it's great. We'd all like to be free, wouldn't we? Sometimes I think we need more freedom today. Sometimes I know we need more freedom today. But freedom, art can't live without freedom. You try to imagine the Beatles coming out in North Korea or China. It's not going to happen. The Beatles couldn't come out in the USSR or any of these oppressive societies. Innovation that rock and roll represents, and the freedom that rock and roll represents, that is asphyxiated in any kind of an oppressive police state regime. And I think we always need to remember that in 2021. But my next point was about freedom, and that is freeform. Now, a big part of what Clapton developed into was probably one of the rock music's most important freeform artists. So I asked myself, well, I'm going to say that about freeform, and then I said, well, if I'm going to say that on a video, what the hell do I actually mean by freeform? That's I think in swimming there's a freestyle. There are other things where people do freestyle. I guess that's kind of do your own thing, right? But what does that mean? I mean, in music and in rock or blues, what is freeform? Well, I would say Cream took Clapton into freeform, and Hendrix, is freeform, and a lot of what we would consider the hard rock of the late 60s, a lot of it with the extended jams was freeform. Now, I have kind of mixed thoughts about that. I love it, and a lot of it, when it's done well, is great. And not everything that's long is automatically what I would call freeform. Like Freebird is long, but I wouldn't necessarily call it freeform, although there's free soloing. But Freeform is where you're experimenting more. You're just out there. You don't know what the hell you're going to play, you know. And neither maybe probably there's a guy next to you and the drummer. It's freeform. You're out there experimenting. Now, like any experiment, there are probably a lot of failed experiments. It's a trial and error process. Maybe that's what. But when you have good players, freeform can be a lot of great things. I think, you know, jazz, I guess I would associate with freeform. It's kind of, whenever I talk that way, I feel like I'm suddenly sort of channeling the beatniks or something, where they would do like freeform poetry. I guess in acting you have improv. That's kind of similar, isn't it? But you know, one thing that occurs to me in Cream, that is probably the period where Clapton was freeform, and that's there's nothing new about freeform, you know, but in the 60s that was very modern. That's one of the things. There's a lesson there somewhere. Cream at its time was considered so modern. It was like modern art, you know, and swinging London. And today it's probably the period of Clapton's career that sounds the most dated and makes the littlest sense to us in 21. But we have to remember that was supposed to be such modern music, but a lot of it was freeform. And so you had Ginger Baker. Now Ginger Baker, on Blind Faith, he wrote that song "Do What You Like." It's in 5/4 time, which is kind of a Turkish time, I think. It's kind of interesting. Again, jazz people like 5/4. But it's do what you like. Everybody do your own thing, you know, which I guess is the mantra, one of the mantras of the 60s. But that's freeform, and freeform can work. I feel like I've done freeform. It's hard to find people that will, A, are interested in doing it, and B, can do it, frankly, because, you know, you can't just end up with a bunch of noise. Yoko Ono was freeform. Yoko Ono is an example of freeform without any talent or training whatsoever. Yoko Ono is an example of freeform with zero musicality, talent, or musical background, among other issues with Yoko Ono. But freeform, if you've got good players that know what they're doing, can be really interesting, you know, and you come up with things. But freeform only works effectively when you have good players. So I always think when and they have to have a grounding. I always think it's kind of like modern art. You know, modern art is an acquired taste. Sometimes I'm not sure I've acquired it, but in modern art, you know, they don't just try to, you know, typically they don't just try to like paint a photograph. Like some art, you know, you look at some of the oil paintings and things from 200 years ago, it was almost like people were trying to paint reality. Well, they didn't have cameras back then, so they're trying to paint the reality. They would try to paint this guitar and make it look just like the guitar. Well, a modern artist wouldn't do that. They would try to, you know, do psychedelic was kind of like that. We're gonna make it all kinds of crazy colors. They'll make the shapes weird or curved. I always thought modern art, which I can enjoy sometimes, but it works when the artist is grounded in the tradition of painting. So I've always thought the best modern or more impressionistic painters and artists were people who could, if they wanted to, do a traditional oil painting or drawing or whatever to some degree of excellence. And then when they just chuck those rules, that's kind of like Beethoven. You know, Beethoven was trained in all those really strict 18th century sonata rules and minuet rules and all the class, which Mozart epitomizes. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a discipline. You know, they say Mozart was absolute musicality. You know, just like a model. Like I'm gonna write this perfect model, like this platonic model little minuet. It's every note's just like the perfect note, you know. And Beethoven came along and he was trained that way, and then sometime sometime he decided to hell with it, and he chucked a lot of those rules. Of course, the piano was coming out, and that enabled him to do all kinds of different things that I suppose would have been seen as pretty wild to people of the time. And but he was able to, he had the discipline and the background that enabled him to just take being more freewheeling in his expressions, but take them and turn them into amazing compositions that still maintain musicality and were grounded in, you know, musical expression at a high level in terms of technique and so on. And I think that's true of Clapton and other artists like that. But he came, just think about it, he came out of the John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, which is like a little textbook blues album. Just perfect, you know. Wouldn't want to change a thing about it that I can think of. But it's like a little model British blues album. Just superb. But it's by the book, kind of in its way. You know, everything's kind of in its place. It's like we're a little club band, and you come and see us, we're going to play these songs great, you know. But and then you took Clapton and Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. They kind of have, I think, more of a jazz background, but somewhat comparable. Came out of all these really, the Graham Bond Trio, right? I think they came out of. But they go into freeform. And that's really what Cream did, and they chucked all those rules, and they went into freeform. So in Cream, you have, you know, like a Willie Dixon Spoonful. I also, you know, Cream's an acquired taste. I think I don't know. I don't want to. I did a talk on Cream. I wish I would have put some pictures in it or something. I think I'm going to start doing that more often, because I think the viewers benefit more when there are pictures, maybe some guitar clips. On the other hand, I thought what I said about Cream, it kind of forced me to sort of think what I think of Cream, because, you know, sometimes when you talk about something, it clarifies it in your own mind. But if you listen to Cream, particularly the Clapton-driven songs in Cream, you had like Willie Dixon Spoonful. Or like my favorite Cream song is Sitting on Top of the World. I think they do it G. But that's an old blues song from before World War I, I think. That's like Make Me a Pallet on Your Floor. And they did Robert Johnson. But they and those, particularly the Sitting on Top of the World and Crossroads. But look, Crossroads, they do that. That's a Robert Johnson song. And in a way, it's like the 12-bar blues in A, Robert Johnson, here's Crossroads. But it's free form. And actually, that's probably one of the more conventional blues songs Cream ever did, Crossroads. But listen to it. It's just out there, you know. And then some of the things Cream did, I think are they're really freeform. Like, and even their lyrics were freeform, like White Room. A lot of those lyrics were written by Peter Brown. And if you want to know one of the things about copyright that I think pisses off some people, that Peter Brown was some hippie. He's still around. I'm sure he's a nice guy. I'm not cutting him down. He wrote all that, I won't say bad poetry, but, you know, like, but the rainbow has a mustache, and, you know, all those weird kind of trippy psychedelic lyrics that got stuck on these Cream songs, like White Room, in a white room with black curtains. And you toss in some of these Eric Clapton solos in there and people love it. Well, Peter Brown ends up being the co-writer on those songs. He's probably still making royalties of those today, and Ginger Baker never did, which is too bad, you know, because who's more important in Cream, Ginger Baker or some guy named Peter Brown that was kind of a hippie poet? Nothing wrong with that, but anyway, you know, that was free form, and a lot of their stuff was just out there. Now, I think to the extent it worked because you did have, it's kind of like modern artists that they might do kind of wild things, but if they had to sit down and do an oil painting that was more traditional, they could. But I still think that there was kind of, it's like a pendulum. They went from these really kind of tight, disciplined songs. You know, rock was like that too, you know, like the early 60s rock versus the late 60s rock, these kind of tight little polished gems, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you to these wild, chuck every rule you can think of and break it, and throw it out the window. So that produced some pretty wild stuff, and so freeform, I think, had its role. I think it was of the time. I think the partying of the late 60s had a lot to do with that. I don't think a lot of audiences today would put up with that, depending on where you were. Maybe at Burning Man or something they might, but even then, Cream only had 3 people to do all that. Like a jam band usually has more players than just 3, I would think. But Clapton played some great guitar in Cream. So I think out of the freeform period, what you take away from that is the extended soloing. And if you think about it, that extended soloing was something that a lot of guitarists, the Allman Brothers, you could say about a lot of them, but Clapton was a pioneer in the extended solo, where you're out there and you're not sure what the hell you're going to play, but you try to think of something, and you take it, and a solo is a journey that you're not sure where you're going. But and if you're good, you're going to have a good ride, but you're not really sure where you land. And I think that's what Cream was trying to do. Now, it was excess. There was youth. I mean, those guys, Clapton was 22, 23, and Cream 24 maybe. So there was youth, there was excess, there was naivete. But I think the one thing that came out of that was those great extended solos for all the context that we miss. I think Cream would have been better with Stevie Winwood and maybe just other better songwriters or something. But what they did have was some damn good guitar solos in it, and I think that was the takeaway. So out of that freeform was, and when you listen to Clapton today, and he'll do like Blues Power or Cocaine and play it for a couple minutes, and just take off and do an extended solo. That's a tribute to Cream. So So I feel like Cream is one of those groups that gets cited all the time, and I don't know how much people sit and listen to them. I don't know how they're on the radio, some of their most popular songs, But that was a really important element, the free form, you know, and it was kind of like modern art, the wild avant-garde, you know, all the colors and the funky pants and hair and the painted guitars, and that was kind of like modern art. Cream was like modern music, you know, modern art, modern architecture, supposed to be anyway. That was the pretense. And of course, again, these were just kids. Now that I'm older, I look, and just the fact that I'm older, I can kind of demythologize it a little bit, as much as I still love it and respect it. And I realize these guys were kids, you know. I mean, 23, yeah. When you're 23, you're not as dumb as when you're 16, but you're still pretty dumb. No offense to you young people out there, you know. And so they were just young, and probably that was great, you know. We all wish we could have that experience, but you know, that all those free solos and everything, you outgrow that pretty quickly. And I think some of it's just the life cycle thing, if nothing, not some music philosophy, you know, evolving or something. Some of it's just maturation, and you know, as you're a human being. But they were young, and those freeform solos are a very important part of Clapton's career. But I think the context for some of his freeform soloing was more fully realized in some of his later albums, like, you know, Derek and the Dominoes has elements of that. I think Blind Faith in some ways was better than Cream. And definitely in concert, I don't think he ever really discarded entirely those big long solos. And that's what people wanted. That's what Cream was famous for. You know, they'd sing a verse or two, and the vocals, they didn't really have like a kick-ass designated singer like a Roger Daltrey or Robert Plant, did they? You know, they just, one of the musicians would kind of sing a little bit, and then it would just be off to the races playing. But one of the takeaways was that, you know, even after Cream seemed dated to people and the times changed, that extended solo where you're starting out and you're not sure what you're going to do, and you can only do that if you've had the discipline in the beginning of your life to not get lost and muck it up. You know, that's the only way you can really do that. You know, you can't just pick up a guitar. You can pick up, I mean, we can learn, we can learn, all of us can learn, but those freeform solos where you're not sure what you're playing, that doesn't work too well if you haven't been through a period where you learned, I don't want to say the basics, but I think that's kind of what I mean. When you learned, that worked for Clapton or Jimmy Page, same thing. Look at all the stuff he did, but that guy is also a student of all kinds of those old records. And Led Zeppelin was freeform, particularly in concert, you know. So the album-oriented rock, there was a lot of freeform elements in it, but I think it evolved. And by the late 70s, it had become a sort of element of a lot of the best music. Pink Floyd, definitely. But Cream was the pioneer, and Clapton was a pioneer. I feel like Cream didn't fully realize it, but they did kind of break the ground on that. And freeform is very cool. It's just something you can overdo it pretty quickly, and but if you got some good people in it, it's great. God bless you. Next, I'm going to talk about Clapton and songs. I hope you'll continue watching this series. I'm going to add some pictures and things to it because like I said, I did that big talk on Cream, and really it kind of helped me formulate my thoughts. You know, sometimes when you speak about something, you formulate your own thoughts. But I wish I would have put some pictures, and I'm not going to redo it, but pictures, maybe some guitar clips. And I'm going to do that on these, and I hope you'll watch them. But next I'm going to talk about Clapton and the song.